Over the last couple of weeks, really the last few months, Turo has made some major changes. Mileage caps and limitations, dynamic pricing, getting rid of the per-car calendar, their new but not so new review policy, and it is long overdue that I address these changes here on my channel. And so today in this video, I'm not only going to be giving you my thoughts on these changes that Turo has been making, but I'm also going to give you some steps that you can take in order to deal or in some cases work around some of these changes as well. But before we dive into that, I do want to remind you guys that I do have my course, the Car Sharing Masterclass, which is a course that teaches you A to Z how to start and scale a car sharing fleet with the exact same business model that I use. The Car Sharing Masterclass teaches you everything you need to know from how to buy the right cars, how to manage your fleet, how to scale, how to automate your systems and processes, as well as everything in between. But the one thing that I am incredibly proud about regarding the Car Sharing Masterclass is that it is an ever-growing course. We update the course at least quarterly, and we update it anytime new Turo policies are introduced. So as these new policies I'm going to be addressing today here in this video have been released, we've been updating the course to reflect that and to help our members deal with these changes. If you're interested in checking out the Car Sharing Masterclass, you can use the code OFFER100 to get $100 off. The link is down in the description below. Now, the first topic that I want to talk about is mileage caps and limitations. Now, what this is Turo's new feature, which basically allows for hosts to limit the amount of mileage that they allow for their long-term guests to drive in their cars on monthly or long-term increments. Now, this feature has been out for quite a while now, I would say at least a month, and the reason why I haven't talked about this feature is because Turo's actually rolling it out in waves, and I actually don't have this feature yet. And so as of recording this video in the first week of September of 2024, I personally do not have the ability to go in and change my monthly or long-term mileage limits. But fortunately, I have been able to get my hands on this feature because of a few course members, so I do know how to navigate it. But because I don't have it, I'm not able to provide you screenshots here in this video, but I probably will make an update video once I do have this feature myself. So this is a feature that Turo has actually been talking about for nearly a year, probably longer behind the scenes. And basically, the idea behind this feature is to make Turo more conducive with long-term renters. As of now, or I guess at least as of this feature being rolled out, monthly mileage for Turo cars was dictated by whatever your daily mileage was. So for example, my entire fleet pretty much is set at 200 miles per day, which means that if a renter books my car for 1 day or 30 days, they're going to be allotted 200 miles per day, which doesn't sound like a lot if you're just renting a car for a few days, but once you have a car for 30, 60, 90 days or longer, that 200 miles per day adds up by a lot, because 200 miles per day for an entire month can be 6,000 miles. If you're allowing more than 200 miles, it's going to be even more. And so this mileage limitation was introduced in theory with the idea of making mileage limits more realistic with what an average driver would drive. The problem with this mileage cap, as Turo has begun to introduce it, is that it is directly tied to a discount for your vehicle. So if you want to be able to opt in to these mileage limitations and say, hey, I actually only want to allow 1,500 miles per month for my long-term renters, Turo is going to force you to give a discount based off of that mileage limitation. Now, I am not 100% sure what the correlation is of like how many miles you can allow and how much discount you're going to be forced to give. I don't know 100% what that looks like because again, I don't have access to this feature yet. But in some cases, I know of hosts personally who've wanted to opt into the 1,200 mileage cap per month, and they have in turn been forced to give a 50-60% discount. I think I can speak for most hosts whenever I say that whenever Turo introduced the idea of capping monthly mileage, we liked the idea of doing that, but we didn't want to be tied to a 40, 50, 60% discount as a result. So a lot of hosts are really upset with this. Now, unfortunately, the way to get around this is really two different strategies. In my opinion, one is significantly better than the other. So the first strategy that you can use is just play around with the mileage and the required discount until you find something that you're comfortable with. There might be a line, a balance that you find where you're like, okay, I'm okay with allowing this amount of mileage and applying this amount of discount, and maybe you just stick with that and see how that works out. But truthfully, I think the second path around this, and it's certainly the one I'm going to be taking, is to just simply opt out of mileage limitations altogether. Fortunately, this is not a required feature as of now, and what I will absolutely be doing with my entire fleet is just simply opting out of it. I have a lot of experience with long-term renters. My longest renter ever with Turo is a year, and at any given point in time, I have anywhere between 20 to 30% of my entire fleet on rentals that are longer than 30 days. So long-term rentals are not anything new to my fleet, and I can tell you from experience that the vast majority of renters don't go anywhere close to 6,000 miles. I would much rather opt out of the mileage limitations and get my full booking price than go in and rent my car for 50% discount and have that long-term renter. So my recommendation is to simply opt out of it. Obviously, this is a personal choice and it's going to be dependent on your car, your goals, how much you bought your car for, as well as your market, but that's the approach that I'm going to take. To opt out of the mileage limitations, there is a simple toggle in the app. Next is the per car calendar, which as of September of 2024 has died. Now, I think that I like the fleet calendar more than most Turo hosts, but I definitely know and can relate to the hosts that don't like it, because while I actually like the Turo fleet calendar quite a lot, my husband absolutely hates it and has basically refused to use it up until now whenever he's been forced to move to it. But that is neither here nor there. Most hosts seem to be unhappy with this change, though I have met a few who don't really care. So if you know how to work the fleet calendar, you can simply skip ahead, but for the sake of teaching people how to navigate these new Turo changes, I want to include this. And so if you don't know how to work the fleet calendar, what you simply do is you go into your Turo app or Turo website. The functionality is pretty similar from computer to app, and you simply want to click on the dates that you want to modify or that you want to view. And so in this case, I'll do my Hyundai Elantra GT. I'll click on the dates. And then from here, you can see that I can click and I can adjust pricing. I can adjust unavailability, or I can adjust or look at the trips. And so with prices, you have the ability to either set the price for that specific day. So in this case, if I wanted to adjust my price to say $35 per day, I would simply click 35, and now these prices are adjusted to 35. If I instead wanted to adjust it by a specific amount, so for example, maybe I want to adjust my pricing by $3 per day for these 3 dates, I would simply put in -3, and now it has adjusted from 35 to 32. To adjust unavailability, you would do basically the same thing. You'd click on unavailability. You would then click block out the calendar, and you would select the days that you want to block out, whether it be, from September 5th until September 9th, whatever dates you want to block out, you would simply block that out. You could also do hourly. So if a car is going to be going into the shop, you can click on hourly adjustments and go about doing it that way. I've actually liked this feature quite a lot because what we do with our fleet, because we have 24/7 availability, we will snooze vehicles every night before we go to bed if they don't have a booking. This typically will result in a couple of cars needing to be snoozed overnight. And what we used to have to do is we used to have to go into the individual vehicle calendar and individually snooze the cars for the night, whereas now we can do it bulk and it makes it super easy. The only thing that I wish that you could do within the fleet calendar is either snooze or activate vehicles directly in the fleet calendar rather than having to go into the vehicle listing and go about doing it that way. That's probably my only personal feedback with the fleet calendar, but I also recognize that people are reporting bugs that I haven't personally experienced, but that doesn't mean that they aren't valid. And so there certainly seems to be some kinks that Turo needs to work out with this fleet calendar, but if you are wanting to learn how to navigate it a bit, hopefully that helps. The next topic that I want to discuss is dynamic pricing. And this is hands down the topic that has pissed off the most hosts. Dynamic pricing is, in short terms, Turo's new algorithm-based pricing models, and supposedly, or at least in theory, it's supposed to work based off of market demand, your car, your actual cash value of your vehicle, what the market looks like, as well as a slew of other factors that we'll probably never know the ins and outs of. And how this is different than, say, automatic pricing, which is what Turo used to have, is that, well, Turo claims that it's better. But the verdict is absolutely still out on that one, and we'll have to see how this dynamic pricing actually performs long term before we can definitively say whether it is in fact better or not. By far the biggest criticism that I've heard with this dynamic pricing model is that you can no longer set a minimum or maximum trip price. Previously, with automatic pricing, you could set a floor price or a maximum price for your car, and Turo would basically adjust your pricing based off of that range. So for example, I did use automatic pricing on about half my fleet. I found that with certain cars, Turo would totally miss the mark on pricing, while others, they were pretty spot on. But one car that I did not use automatic pricing on was my Lincoln Navigator, and it's because Turo consistently underpriced it. My Lincoln Navigator is a luxury XL SUV, and there aren't that many of them in the Dallas market. This car consistently rents for anywhere between $85 to about $125 per day, depending on the time of the year. But Turo has consistently told me that I should be listing this car for closer to $50 to $65 per day, even though this car gets rented at a much higher price point. So with my Lincoln Navigator, I opted out of automatic pricing. But with cars like a Toyota Yaris or a Ford Focus, I did have automatic pricing turned on, and I just had a minimum price and a maximum price of how much I thought this car could realistically rent for. And I found with these economical cars, Turo was pretty spot on. But what is really bothering hosts with this new dynamic pricing model is that Turo has gotten rid of the ability to set a maximum and a minimum floor price. And so as of recording this video on September 17th moving forward, dynamic pricing is going to be implemented on all cars. But you can actually look at your fleet calendar today to see what your car's prices are from September 17th moving forward. And because cars like my Lincoln Navigator are now opted into dynamic pricing, I found that for most of the time, probably about 70% of the month, Turo was pricing my Lincoln Navigator at about $55 to $65 per day, even though I know for a fact that it has been historically renting for significantly more. And the problem is that this dynamic pricing now gets implemented very, very far in advance. So for example, during the holiday season, if you have a car that you know for a fact can rent for $150 per day during Christmas, but Turo thinks it can only rent for $100 per day, you have to be mindful and go forward in those holidays far in advance to ensure that your car doesn't get booked for that lower price and you go in there and you adjust it manually. So the thing that I think a lot of hosts, including myself, are a bit confused about is why Turo got rid of the minimum and maximum price, but why they still allow us to adjust the price. Because it seems like Turo's open to the idea of us adjusting the prices on our cars, even with dynamic pricing turned on, but they just make it much more difficult for hosts to do that. Now, unfortunately, I don't think this feature is going away, so us as Turo hosts just have to learn to adapt and work around it. And my recommendation is to do a pretty consistent audit on what your prices are and to adjust your prices accordingly. Remember that as a Turo host, it isn't a good thing to be booked months out in advance. If you are booked out months out in advance, that means your prices are probably too low. But if you want to adjust your prices, here's how you can do that pretty quickly. So if you're in the mobile app, you're going to simply tap a vehicle and the date that you want to adjust the pricing for. You're then going to scroll to the end date. So for example, if I wanted to adjust pricing from September 5th, 2024 to December 31st, 2024, I would simply go into the app, I would select a vehicle for today, September 5th, I'd click it, then I would scroll all the way to December 31st, and then I would click that date and hold it. And now all of the dates are going to be selected. From there, I can adjust the pricing accordingly. If you're working from a browser, you'd basically do the same thing. You would click on the first date, you would then press Shift and click on the second date, and then Turo will select all the dates. To select more than one vehicle shown on your calendar, you'll need to filter the vehicles that you want to adjust, and then you would basically follow the exact same process. Where really going that option only makes sense is if you want to adjust multiple types of vehicles, either by a certain dollar amount. So for example, you want to increase a bunch of vehicles by $5 per day, or you have a number of vehicles that are at the same price point and you can adjust them in bulk. But I know for me personally with my fleet, a lot of my cars are going to have to be adjusted on a per vehicle basis, which is definitely a pain in the butt. This is definitely an annoying change, and I certainly don't think that this makes hosts' lives easier, but I personally believe that this is Turo's way of just trying to have more control into what Turo hosts are pricing their vehicles at. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I think that's the thought process behind it, but who knows? And in other news, completely unrelated to everything else that I'm talking about in this video, it was released as of me recording this that Uber and Turo were actually going to be partnering. So Uber car share is out, Turo is in for Uber, which is a good thing for Turo hosts and probably also explains why Turo is now allowing gig workers. But like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell. And I will see you guys in the next video.